Hey y'all! So today we're going to attempt to finish chapter 12. There's not a lot left, and I'm not going to be reading quite as much. I'm going to be summarizing a good bit of it. So I'm pretty sure we can finish it out, but I just want to allow myself a little space there in case we get to talking about, well, I guess I get to talking about certain points that I just feel need to be elaborated on. And so I just want to leave myself a little space there. But I am going to try to finish out chapter 12. And then chapter 13 is called Battle Scars, Membership in the Scar Clan. So I'm excited for that. I think that'll be really beautiful too. So, okay, I hope that you're excited to dive in with me. And yes, I turned into a lobster yesterday, so you may notice. But I had a great time. It's beautiful out there. So I hope that you're enjoying some decent weather wherever you are. But all right, so to get right to it, this last portion of chapter 12, I know we've been talking about rage, and I think that's a really good way, a really good door for discussion to go into evaluating emotions altogether, because they can be powerful, right? And so as we learn and grow and mature, and we want to bring ourselves into a place of balance, I just feel like, rage, all the concepts we're talking about with regard to rage, I feel like hopefully it gets the wheels turning for you as far as other emotions as well. So so that we can, like I said, just work to bring all of that in balance and to be in control of our emotions. You know what I mean? And not let our emotions control us. Specifically, the next portion goes into, I like it, pinpointing exactly how to deal with rage. She's talked about the value of it, the fact that it's not to be ignored. And a lot of times it's our intuition screaming at us, and it's that inner conflict of us wanting, this is me, my thoughts, that inner conflict or resistance inside of us wanting to deny what we really feel about, like a red flag right in front of us, and so our intuition just bursts out sometimes. And so I think that just like with that last story, the man's first inclination was right, that this dude that came up in the desert was a bad guy, and he turned out to be a bad guy. He just didn't handle it right. You know what I mean? So I think that was just a good example. We can learn so much from these stories, right? So if we can just extract what we need from all this, then it's just going to be another step on our journey. That, again, don't try to do too much at one time. That's where we get in trouble. We get overwhelmed. But just step by step, little by little, and we're good to go. Or like in the movies Frozen, I told you about how they were saying, the next right thing, just do the next right thing or take the next right step. If we can do that, then that's great, Okay, so the first section is called descansos, and I hope I'm saying that right. And basically, she's opening up talking about, she talks about a lot, and for time's sake, I just, again, recommend that you get the book and you read, because she just really expands and she does a deep dive into every aspect of all these topics, and I just love it. But she's talking about the depth of pain. And she says there's a time in our lives, usually in midlife, when a woman has to make a decision, possibly the most important psychic decision of her future life, about whether to be bitter or not. And I think that being bitter, it is sort of, from an observational viewpoint, it sort of seems like that's something that just happens to people. I don't don't think anybody, makes a conscious choice to be bitter. It's just a result, and I feel like it's a result of what happens when you're not paying attention to how things are affecting you. So I love how what she's going to introduce us to here in a minute is a way to bring intention and attention to those hard feelings, those deep and powerful feelings. And so she explains that descansos are, well, it says right here, they're symbols that mark a death. You've seen the little crosses on the side of the road that are sometimes decorated elaborately. She talks about, with silk flowers and, sometimes, glitter and things that sparkle. It's just, they're usually decorated very elaborately. So she says descansos are symbols that mark a death. Right there, right on that spot, someone's journey in life halted unexpectedly. There's been a car accident, or someone was walking along the road and died of heat exhaustion, or a fight took place there. Something happened there that altered that person's life and the lives of other persons forever. And then she ties that in. So that's like a literal physical death. So now she's going to tie that into like a psychic type of spiritual, emotional death, or like a death of a part of us that happens when we go through trauma. It's like it impacts us at that level, here and here. So she's going to relate it to that. She says that women have died 1,000 deaths before they are 20 years old. I don't know about 20, but for some of it's more like 30 or 40, right? But you can relate to that in some way, I think, what she means. And the problem with this is when painful things happen, I feel like we don't want to think about it, and we push it, we treat it like it's off limits. You know what I mean? And I don't think that that's the best way to deal with it. It's like shoving it down, off limits. So she explains what to do, and really we want to do the exact opposite of that. So she says, to make descansos means taking a look at your life and marking where the small deaths, las muertes chiquitas, and the big deaths, las muertes grandotas, have taken place. And then she explains what she's done with her patients as a therapist. She says, I like to make a timeline of a woman's life on a big long sheet of white butcher paper, and to mark with a cross the places along the graph, starting with her infancy all the way to the present, where parts and pieces of herself and her life have died. So there's an activity for us that we can bring it, to bring attention and intention to our healing. And so she says, we mark where there were roads not taken, paths that were cut off, ambushes, betrayals, and deaths. I put a little cross along the timeline at the places that should have been mourned or still need to be mourned. And then I write in the background, forgotten, for those things that the woman senses but have not yet surfaced. Yeah, maybe things that have pushed into our subconscious or even unconscious if they were especially traumatic, right? Yeah. I also write forgiven. So she writes forgotten for the things that have not surfaced. And then I'll also write forgiven over those things the woman has, for the most part, released. I encourage you to make descansos, to sit down with a timeline of your life and say, where are the crosses? Where are the places that must be remembered and must be blessed? In all our meanings that you've brought forward into your life today, everything makes us who we are today, They must be remembered, but they must be forgotten at the same time. It takes time and patience. So then she goes into, she says to be gentle, with yourself. And certainly as we're healing, that's incredibly important, right? So then she goes into injured instinct and rage. She says if a woman is instinct injured, she is typically faced with several challenges regarding rage. First, she often has a problem with intrusion recognition. That's where, it's kind of like, I feel like, especially if we were conditioned as children to accept abuse as normal, and so we didn't learn to catch it, even things that, still today aren't widely recognized as abuse, like emotional abuse or psychological abuse or neglect, things like that, then it's kind of like we were conditioned growing up that way. And so what we consider normal is not what someone brought up in a healthier environment would consider normal. And that, to me, is why we have problems with intrusion recognition. Yeah, we don't catch in our adult life when there's a person that comes along that's abusing us. We may just normalize that too, you know. She is slow to notice territory violations. Yeah, because narcissists push your boundaries big time. And does not register her own anger until it is upon her. And that's where we can be hard on ourselves. You know what I mean? And when we have the anger come up like that, like it does, it's just like the man at the beginning of the withered trees, the story. Her temper comes upon her. Her temper comes upon her in a kind of ambush. This lag is the results of instincts injured by exhortations to little girls to not notice dissension, to try to be peacemakers at all costs, to not interfere and stand the pain until everything calms down or temporarily goes away. Typically, such women do not act upon their rage at the right time, perhaps jumping the gun or having a delayed reaction, weeks, months, or even years later, realizing what they should have, could have, would have said or done. Yeah. This is usually not caused by shyness or introversion, but by too much thinking, too much trying to be nice, and not enough acting from soul. The wild soul knows when and how to act if a woman will only listen. Excuse me. Right response carries insight and right amounts of compassion and strength mixed together. Injured instinct must be righted by practicing and enforcing strong boundaries and by practicing firm and, when possible, generous responses, but solid ones nonetheless. Yes. A woman may have difficulty releasing anger, even when it impedes her own life, even when it causes her to obsessively dwell upon events years old as though they happened yesterday. Dwelling on trauma and doing so intensely for a period of time is very important to healing, but eventually all injury has to be given sutures and allowed to heal over into scar tissue. Yes. So, allowing the scars to work their magic is crucial. And so then she goes into talking about collective rage, and she's just talking about, challenges we face as a collective whole, culturally, politically, socially, and how important that is. So she kind of goes into a discussion about that. It's very short, though. And then she says, it is part of the healthy instinctual psyche to have deep reactions to disrespect, threat, and injury. It is a natural and expected part of learning about the collective worlds of soul and psyche. So then she goes into talking about being stuck in old rage. And I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit to you. Actually, I'm going to read a good bit. It says, if and when rage again becomes a dam to creative thought and action, then it must be softened or changed. For those who have spent considerable time working through a trauma, whether it was caused by someone's cruelty, neglect, lack of respect, recklessness, arrogance, ignorance, or even fate, there comes a time to forgive in order to release the psyche to return to a normal state of calm and peace. So she's prepping us to go into the last part of chapter 12, which is on forgiveness. And I understand that's a very personal thing and a personal decision. So again, I'm not trying to, I'm just reading what she's got. And there's some of these concepts where, I'm on the fence about her approach. And then, and other times I disagree altogether. So just know that as I'm reading through this, just take what resonates for you and just leave the rest. Okay. But her point, I think, is that forgiveness is for our benefit, is the way I'm understanding what she's trying to say. Again, I'll read this last part. There comes a time to forgive in order to release the psyche, our psyche, to return to a normal state of calm and peace, because that's what we want. I mean, we do want peace, we want to be able to rest in that and have just a certain kind of calmness as our baseline, because stress can kill you. I mean, it can. And I know all of us have either had a heart attack or know someone who's had a heart attack. And it's, it's just a very dangerous thing. So peace is worth fighting for, which is kind of kind of funny to say that, I guess, but you see what I'm saying. She says, when a woman has trouble letting go of anger or rage, it's often because she's using rage to empower herself. While that may have been wisdom at the beginning, now she must be careful, for ongoing rage is a fire that burns her own primary energy. Yeah, I definitely think that when you're in the midst of being triggered all the time, when you're in the toxic environment still, aren't you just exhausted all the time? I know I was. It just really does a number. It does a number on our bodies, our minds, souls, all parts of us, and it's very exhausting. To be in this state is like, I love this analogy she says, to be in this state is like speeding through life, pedal to the metal, trying to live a balanced life with the accelerator pressed all the way to the floor. So that's something I think that we can take with us and kind of check in with ourselves throughout the day and be like, where's the accelerator right now? Is it safe? Is it okay for me to let up off the gas a little bit? You know what I mean? Kind of just relax. It's part of self-care, So she says, the fieriness of rage is not to be mistaken for a substitute for a passionate life. So there's a difference in healthy passion versus the passion of rage, which is more like a fieriness. I'm processing with you as I read. So it says, it is not life at its best. It is a defense that, once the time of needing it for protection is past, costs plenty to keep. After a time, it burns interminably hot, pollutes our ideas with its black smoke, and occludes other ways of seeing and apprehending. I think that last sentence, it's all important, but I feel like that last sentence is really important. She says, if we allow our rage to continue, and she says, if it burns interminably hot, it can occlude other ways of seeing and apprehending, and that's where it's going to cloud our judgment. We may be in the presence of a beautiful soul, and we may not recognize it at first, or we may just not see the abundant blessings that are before us, or we may just misjudge in some way or another. You know what I mean? Because our operating assessment tool, our intuition, is kind of, maybe it takes a back seat when we're stuck in rage. Something to think about, maybe journal about. She says, now I'm not going to tell you a big fat lie and say you can cleanse all your rage today or next week and it will be gone forever. The angst and torment of times past rise up in the psyche on a cyclical basis. It's always going back to cycles. It must be just a pattern, from the divine. We can see it all in nature. Even in the seashells, you can look at even the tiniest ones, and they've all got this pattern. And so I think that's just a common theme throughout all of creation, seems to be. So she says, the angst and torment of times past rise up in the psyche on a cyclical basis. Although a deep purging discharges most of the archaic hurt and rage, the residue can never completely be swept clear, but it should leave a very light ash, not a hungry fire. So the clearing of residual rage must become a periodic hygienic ritual, one that releases us, for to carry old rage beyond the point of its usefulness is to carry a constant, if unconscious, anxiety. Yeah, and we don't want anxiety to be our baseline. We want peace and calm to be our baseline. So then she says, sometimes people become confused and think that to be stuck in an outdated rage means to fuss and fume and to act out and toss and throw things. And this is really interesting right here. It says, it does not mean that in most cases. It means to be tired all the time. It's like maybe we're, suppressing rage, or maybe people suppress rage and don't consciously acknowledge it, so it's showing up in these other symptoms, I thought that was really interesting. It says it means to be tired all the time, to have a thick layer of cynicism, to dash the hopeful, the tender, the promising. It means to be afraid you will lose before you open your mouth. It's just like operating in fear. I try to check in with myself daily and make sure that I'm not doing that, because I know that's really important. I truly believe it does affect outcomes. So It means to reach flashpoint inside, whether you show it on the outside or not. It means, okay, here's a word, bilious, entrenched silences. It means feeling helpless, but there is a way out, and it is through forgiveness. So then she goes into talking about, how people are just like, oh, forgiveness, are you serious? And so she talks about the trouble of forgiving and how hard it is. And her position is that we're looking at forgiveness wrong. Her position is that we think that forgiveness means 100% like right away. And she's saying that that's not the case. She's saying that it's... well, let me just read this one sentence. A woman who can work up a good 95% forgiveness of someone or something tragic and damaging almost qualifies for beatification, if not sainthood. And then if she is 75% forgiving and 25%, I don't know if I can ever forgive fully, and I don't know if I want to. That is more the norm. And she even goes into, the lower percentages of forgiveness. And she's just saying, if it's less than 10%, you've either just begun or you're not really trying yet. So it's just changing that perspective on how we understand forgiveness is what she's talking about. And again, I think her point is that it's beneficial for us. It's not about the other person. It's about allowing us to operate in balance and in peace and not anxiety. So yes, she says you're not bad if you do not forgive easily, and you're not a saint if you do. Each to her own, and all in due time. So I like that she's understanding of where we all are. And so then she goes into the 4 stages of forgiveness. And so I'm going to go through this a little bit for you. And number 1 is to forego, to leave it alone, she says. Number 2 is to forbear, to abstain from punishing. Number 3 is to forget, to aver from memory, to refuse to dwell. Number 4 is to forgive, to abandon the debt. So she's going to go into each of these sections, and I'm just going to hit the highlights for you. So the first section is to forego. To begin to forgive, it is good to forego for a while. That is, to take a break from thinking about the person or event for a while. It is not leaving something undone, but rather more like taking a vacation from it. This prevents us from being exhausted, allows us to strengthen in other ways to have other happiness in our lives. Remember how she's talking about if we're focused on the bad, we can't see the good, So that's important. I think even as soon as you remove yourself from a toxic environment, you haven't even started thinking about healing or forgiveness or anything like that. Just taking a break from it is healthy. I think that's a really healthy approach. She says the idea is not to overlook, but to become agile and strong at detaching from the issue. So it's intentional detachment. And then she goes into the second stage. She says to forbear. It says it means to give a bit of grace to the situation, not the person, but the situation, and see how that assists. To refrain from unnecessary punishing strengthens integrity of action and soul. Yeah, so you can feel good about it. It's like I could do this, this, and this, but I won't. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't align with my values or my integrity, the way I want to operate in life. The third stage is to forget. She says to forget means to aver from memory, to refuse to dwell. In other words, to let go, to loosen one's hold, particularly on memory. To forget does not mean to make yourself brain dead. Conscious forgetting means letting go of the event. To not insist it stay in the foreground, but rather allow it to be relegated to the background or move off stage. Yeah. We practice conscious forgetting by refusing to summon up the fiery material. We refuse to recollect. To forget is an active, not a passive endeavor. So again, this is all with intention. And then the last stage is to forgive. And she has a lot to say about this stage, but I'm just going to hit the highlights for you. It says it does not mean giving up one's protection, but one's coldness. It does not mean giving up one's protection, but one's coldness. And that goes back to the concept of frozen, being frozen. And there's another song speaking of the Disney movies Frozen, that I don't think I put a link to, I forgot, but it's a song about the frozen heart, and it says beware the frozen heart, and I think that means to beware the frozen heart in ourselves and others, because a narcissist certainly has a frozen heart, if they even have a heart at all. I mean, it's not operating. There's no empathy. But we don't want our own hearts to get to that point, to allow this trauma to freeze our heart over, because then we won't have the capacity to love, and we want to have the capacity to love again, and I believe even more deeply than before, because we now have this wisdom and appreciation. We know what we're looking for, and we know how rare it is, and we're going to value that. And so it would be a huge cost to not properly heal. Whether you include forgiveness or not, it would be a huge cost to not properly heal our trauma, because that means we're going to be shutting out love forever, and that's tragic, really. So it says, how does one know if she has forgiven? You tend to feel sorrow over the circumstance instead of rage. Not the person. I don't think this is about missing a person. How can you miss somebody that treated you horribly? You know what I mean? So you may miss the illusion of what you thought you had. Like in the early stages, you may go through that. But she says you tend to feel sorrow over the circumstance. Just, the whole situation, I think, instead of rage. You tend to feel sorry for the person rather than angry with him. You tend to have nothing left to remember to say about it all. You understand the suffering that drove the offense to begin with. These are just all like different ways, I think, to look at things. You prefer to remain outside the milieu. You are not, I think I said it right that time, milieu. You are not waiting for anything. You are not wanting anything. There is no lariat snare around your ankle, stretching from way back here to there. So no chains, you know what I mean? She says you are free to go. It may not have turned out to be a happily ever after, but most certainly there is now a fresh once upon a time waiting for you from this day forward. How beautiful is that? So the benefit to us is freedom. Again, we're not going to be open to the abundance from the divine improving to us how awesome life can be if we're just stuck in old rage or old traumas. So that's some big motivation to me. And I just want us to be free from the trauma, you know what I mean? I want us to be at a good place, to be able to enjoy life. And that's what it's about. Life is short, and we want to enjoy every moment and see the good. We want to see through the lens of good, of gratefulness, of abundant potential, you know, and planting seeds every day through our choices that are going to bring us just a beautiful life. That's what it's all about. So yes, that's it. That's all of chapter 12. We did make it through, and I hope that again I've got your wheels turning up here in a good way, and I hope that I've given you a lot to think about and journal on, and I hope that this has been encouraging and inspiring and uplifting. That's my goal. And so next time we'll come together and we'll go over chapter 13, which is called Battle Scars, Membership in the Scar Clan. And honestly, I can remember from the last 2 times I read the book, but again, it's been like 20 years, even since the last time, or maybe 15 since the last time. But I remember these last 2 chapters are so just rich and powerful, and I'm just so excited to share the end of this book with you. So thank you so much, and I mean that, for coming along with me. I'm just really enjoying this. I hope you are too, and I hope that you have a very beautiful day, and I will see you again soon.